Baron Theron Kast's estate sat on a rise overlooking the eastern road, 3 days' ride from Thorngate. The manor was stone, older than Thorngate's founding, built when Dural's borders were still being drawn in blood. The walls were thick, the windows narrow, the towers functional rather than decorative. This wasn't a palace, it was a fortress that happened to have a family living in it. William arrived on horseback, a rented mare because he didn't own a horse and hadn't needed one until now. Garrik rode beside him on a mule, which the dwarf insisted was more dignified than a horse, and which William suspected was simply closer to the ground. "Good work," the Baron said, setting the blade down. "Better than Harlan's, better than anything I've sourced from the capital." "The ore makes the difference," William said. "We've been experimenting with local deposits. The grain structure is superior." "I can see that." Theron ran a thumb along the edge. "I'll want more. 50 infantry blades by autumn. I have a large garrison. The orc activity in the eastern hills has doubled since spring. Patrols are finding tracks a mile from my outer farms. Something's pushing them." Gruznak. The name surfaced from the blueprint room. The orc warlord, level 38, uniting tribes. William had been tracking the reports for months through adventurer gossip and guild bulletins. "I've heard the same from the Adventurers Guild," William said carefully. "They're seeing more organized movements, patrols instead of raiding parties. I know about everything that comes through my forge. Adventurers talk. I listen." Theron studied him with those Kast family eyes, the cataloging gaze that William had learned to recognize as a sign of intelligence, not suspicion. "Come inside," the Baron said. "We should talk." The Baron's study was pragmatic. Maps on the walls, a weapon rack by the door, a desk buried in reports. Theron poured 2 cups of wine, one for himself, one for William, who accepted it because refusing a baron's wine was a diplomatic misstep he couldn't afford. "The dungeon on my eastern border," Theron said, settling into his chair. "You've heard of it?" "The locals call it the Maw, one of the deeper dungeons in the region. Upper levels are standard. Goblins, kobolds, the usual vermin. Mid-levels have orcs and stronger creatures. Nobody goes below level 30. He pulled a map from the pile on his desk and spread it flat. It was a topographic survey of the barony, with the dungeon marked as a dark spot on the eastern edge, annotated with dates and expedition notes. "I've had 3 teams go into the upper levels in the past month. Standard clearance operations, keep the goblin population down, prevent incursions. All 3 reported the same thing. The dungeon is changing. New passages opening, creatures in places they shouldn't be, and the abyssal bleed, the mana that leaks up from the lower levels, is stronger than it's been in decades." Abyssal bleed. That was exactly what William needed. Abyssal salt crystallized where abyssal mana bled. Theron raised an eyebrow. "The magic ore we use in our forging. It's sourced locally, but the quality varies. I've been looking for new deposits, and dungeons are one of the best sources. The mana concentration underground produces ore with superior profiles." It was a plausible lie, close enough to the truth to withstand scrutiny. "I'd like access to the Maw's upper levels to survey the ore deposits. In exchange, I'll provide the 50 infantry blades at a 20% discount." "Ore surveying." Theron's voice was flat, not dismissive, evaluating. "The upper levels aren't what concerns me. It's the mid-levels, where the ore is actually valuable, and the mid-levels have orcs. I'd need a small escort, 2 or 3 experienced fighters, plus my partner." He gestured toward the door, behind which Garrik was waiting in the hall, examining the stonework with professional interest. "Garrik is a capable combatant, and I can hold my own." "You're 14. Theron's hand stopped halfway to his wine cup. The Baron stared at William with an expression that had nothing to do with his age and everything to do with the number that had just come out of his mouth. "Level 20. Yes. Yes. The Baron set down his wine cup, slowly, deliberately, with the controlled precision of a man who'd just been told something that violated his understanding of the world and needed a moment to reassemble it. "My war marshal is level 24, Theron said. His voice was careful, measured, the voice of a military man running threat assessments. He's 63 years old. He's fought in 4 wars, killed over 200 men, and trained since he was old enough to hold a sword. He's the strongest fighter in the kingdom of Dural, and the court treats him like a strategic asset, because he is. And you're sitting in my study telling me that a 14-year-old orphan smith from a frontier town is 4 levels below the most dangerous human on this island." 5 levels, actually. I was 19 before the dungeon. The Orc Patrol helped. The Orc Patrol helped. Theron repeated the words like he was testing whether they were real. "You don't fight like a level 19. You fight like someone who's been trained by more than a church's sword manual." "What teachers?" "The kind who aren't around to ask." The Baron's jaw worked. He looked at William, really looked, past the age and the forged dust and the unremarkable face. And whatever he saw there made him pick up his wine cup again and take a long, slow drink. "The mid-levels start at the 3rd stratum," Theron said finally. "That's where the abyssal bleed becomes significant and where the Orc patrols operate. I'll give you access to the first 3 strata, upper and upper mid-levels. I'll assign 2 of my garrison soldiers as escorts. You'll have 3 days. And if we need to go deeper?" "You won't." The Baron's voice hardened. "The 4th stratum and below are off-limits. I've lost good soldiers down there. The orcs in the mid-levels are organized. They have a war chief, level 28, who runs the patrols like a military operation. He's been pushing upward, testing my boundary. If his patrols find you in his territory, you're not adventurers on a survey." "William." The Baron leaned forward. "I'm giving you this access because your steel is exceptional and because my nephew speaks highly of you. Kale doesn't speak highly of many people. He says you're the most interesting person he's ever met, and coming from a prince who's met half the nobility on Varanthos, that means something." "I like Kyle." "Good. Because he likes you, and I'd hate to have to explain to my sister why her favorite son's friend died in my dungeon." He folded the map and handed it to William. 3 days. First 3 strata, don't go deeper. Don't engage the orcs unless they engage you first, and if you find anything that concerns you, anything at all. Theron stood, extended his hand. William shook it, firm, equal. The handshake of a business deal that both parties understood was more than business. "Welcome to the Maw," the Baron said. "Try not to die." The entrance was a fissure in a limestone cliff face, wide enough for 2 men to walk abreast, descending at a steady angle into the earth. The Baron's soldiers, a woman named Bren and a man called Holt, went first. Both were level 15, experienced dungeon runners, equipped with the standard cavalry blades William had forged. Bren carried a shield. Holt carried a crossbow. They moved with the practiced coordination of soldiers who'd cleared dungeon corridors together. Garrik went next, his warhammer slung across his back, his eyes scanning the walls with the professional interest of a dwarf seeing underground construction for the first time. "Good stone," he muttered, running his hand along the corridor wall. "Natural. Dwarves build for permanence. Dungeons build for function. This stone will last as long as the core feeds it, and not a day longer." William went last, verdant drawn, the blade's green shimmer casting faint light on the tunnel walls. His bare feet read the stone floor. The subtle vibrations, the temperature gradients, the life signatures of everything ahead. The dungeon was alive. He could feel it. A vast, slow presence beneath the stone, the dungeon core pulsing somewhere in the deeps like a buried heart. It didn't communicate. It didn't need to. It simply was, drawing mana from the creatures within its walls, feeding on the magic force of every living thing that entered its domain. The first stratum was exactly as described. Standard dungeon ecology, the kind of environment that entry-level adventurers cleared for experience and basic loot. The corridors were wide, lit by bioluminescent moss that the dungeon cultivated on the walls. Goblin tracks covered the floor, small, numerous, recent, but no goblins. The Baron's clearance teams had been thorough. They found the first ore deposit an hour in. William stopped at a section of wall where the stone was discolored, a dark band running through the limestone, shot through with crystalline veins that caught the Verdanth's light and reflected it in shades of amber and deep blue. His earth sense picked it up before his eyes did, a dense mana signature, concentrated, divine sage, ore identification. This is Ashvine ore, mana profile, fire, 45%, water 8%, wind 12%, earth 55%, abyssal 3%, divine 5%, nature 6%. Moderate grade, usable for weapon forging with proper refinement. The earth and fire affinities are strong enough to produce steel with enhanced durability and heat resistance. The abyssal trace is negligible. Ashvine, good ore, not exceptional, but good. Exactly the kind of deposit he'd claimed to be surveying. The dwarf pressed his hand to the wall, closed his eyes, and let his innate dwarven temperature sense read the stone. His beard twitched. Good grain, dense, temperature profile is... He paused, frowned. Odd. There's a cold layer running beneath it. Very faint, but it's there. Not natural thermal variation. The abyssal bleed. William felt it now, through the verdant root, beneath the ore deposit, threading through the deep stone like a cold current in a warm ocean. The abyssal mana was still far below them, many strata down, but it was rising, leaking upward through cracks and fissures in the dungeon's structure. I don't like it. Abyssal mana and forge work don't mix, makes the steel unpredictable. Garrik pulled his hand back. But the ore itself is clean. I'd work with this. William chipped a sample, labeled it in his field notebook, and they moved on. The limestone gave way to a darker stone, basalt, ancient, volcanic in origin. The bioluminescent moss shifted from blue-white to a deep purple, casting the passages in an underwater gloom. The air grew cooler. The mana concentration thickened. William felt the change through his bare feet first. The abyssal bleed, stronger here, a cold undercurrent in the stone that made the verdant root's natural cycling feel sluggish. Not dangerous, not yet, but present. A reminder that the dungeon was connected to something vast and dark and very, very deep. The creature density increased. They passed through a chamber where kobolds had been nesting, the remains of a recent clearance operation, bodies still decomposing, the smell sharp. It coated the walls like frost, a thin, crystalline crust of black salt that gleamed dully in Verdanth's light. The salt was cold to the touch, cold enough that William could feel the temperature differential through the stone before he touched it. The air around it smelled of sulfur and something older, something that didn't have a name in any language he knew. This is it. He pulled out his field notebook, making a show of surveying and sampling. While Bren and Holt watched the corridor entrances and Garrik examined the salt with professional curiosity, William carefully chipped a portion of the crust into a lead-lined container, the one he'd brought specifically for this purpose, stored at the... More than this. The salt forms where the abyssal bleed is strongest. We need to find a concentration point, a fissure, a crack in the stone where the mana is coming through in volume. There. Garrik pointed to the far wall, where the crystalline crust was thicker, darker, almost black. That's your concentration. Feel it? William felt it. The abyssal bleed was pouring through that section of wall, a steady stream of cold, dark mana that made the verdant root shudder. The salt had built up in thick deposits, layers of crystallized abyssal energy that had been accumulating for years, decades, maybe longer. The work was slow. The salt was dense and brittle. It wanted to shatter rather than chip, and shattered salt evaporated. He had to be precise, working the chisel at a low angle, peeling the crust off in sheets. Every few minutes, he sealed the container and checked the seal. Direct sunlight would destroy the salt. If the container leaked, the ambient mana in the air would start degrading it within hours. He worked for 40 minutes, filled the container 3/4 full. Enough for the cure, with surplus. William. Bren's voice, sharp from the corridor entrance. Company. Patrol formation. Orcs, Bren said. She'd drawn her sword, shield up. Holt had his crossbow loaded, bolt seated. 4 signatures coming from the east corridor, 2 minutes out. Level? William asked. 4 orcs, mid-20s, organized patrol. The Baron's warning echoed, "He's been pushing upward, testing my boundary." "We can avoid them," William said. "Fall back through the north corridor, loop around." "Can't!" Holt was looking at the map he'd memorized. "North corridor dead ends in 50 meters. We're in a junction chamber. 3 entrances, 1 exit. They're coming from the exit direction." "We fight," Garrik said. It wasn't a question. He'd unslung his war hammer and was testing its weight with short, practiced swings. "We fight," William confirmed. He sealed the lead container and stowed it in his pack. Drew Verdanth. The blade's green shimmer intensified in the abyssal-rich environment. The worm's spirit responding to the increased mana density, resonating with something deep and old. The blade didn't like abyssal mana. William could feel it, a subtle disharmony, like a musical instrument hearing a note in the wrong key. The verdant worm's nature affinity pushed against the cold abyssal bleed, creating a faint vibration in the steel. "Bren, Holt, form a line across the east corridor entrance. Shields forward, funnel them into a bottleneck. Garrik, behind the line, hammer ready for anything that gets through. I'll flank." "Flank how?" Bren asked. "The corridors are our only exits." "The walls." He pressed his palm against the basalt. "Give me 30 seconds. He felt the stone respond. Tiny fissures in the wall near the east corridor widened, not enough to be visible, but enough to create handholds. A gap between the chamber wall and the corridor ceiling, hidden by shadow, wide enough for a small person to press into. A hiding spot, a flanking position, an ambush point, 30 seconds of nature magic in the making. "Positions," he said. He waited. The orcs came. These were soldiers. The first 2 were massive, 7 feet tall, broad as door frames, gray-green skin covered in scar tissue, and crude armor made from scavenged dungeon materials. Leather, chain links, bone plates. Their weapons were functional, short spears with stone heads, heavy cleavers worn from use. Their eyes were small, sharp, alert, sweeping the corridor with the trained awareness of beings that lived in constant combat. The second 2 were larger. One carried a shield, an actual shield, wooden, reinforced with iron bands, maintained with care. The other carried a war horn and what looked like a command baton. This one was the patrol leader. It wore a necklace of teeth, not animal teeth. Humanoid, dwarf-sized. The patrol entered the chamber. The lead pair registered Bren and Holt immediately. 2 humans in formation across the corridor. Weapons drawn, standard defensive posture. The orcs didn't charge. They stopped. The patrol leader raised its baton and the formation tightened, shields up, spears forward. It was a textbook military response. Assess, form, wait. These weren't berserkers. They were trained. "Human soldiers," the patrol leader said. Its voice was deep, guttural, but the words were clear. Common tongue, heavily accented. "Baron's land. You don't belong here. Baron's permission ends at the 2nd stratum boundary. This chamber is boundary. You are at the line." The patrol leader's eyes swept the room, counting heads. 4 of you. 2 soldiers, a dwarf. And it paused, looking at the space where William should have been standing. Where is the 4th? Now. William dropped from the shadow gap above the corridor entrance. Not a kill, but the patrol leader stumbled, roaring, blood spraying from the wound. Then the corridor erupted. Bren charged the lead pair, shield first, forcing them back into the narrow corridor where their reach advantage was negated. Holt put a crossbow bolt into the shield-bearer's thigh. Not a kill shot, but the leg buckled, and the orc dropped to one knee. Garrick's hammer came around in a devastating arc and connected with the fallen orc's helmet. The sound was like a forge hammer hitting an anvil. The orc didn't get up. The fist grazed his temple. Stars exploded across his vision. He tasted copper. Earth sense. Feel it. Through the verdant root, the floor beneath the orc's feet was a network of stone and mana. William pushed, not roots, not plants, just raw force through the earth. And the stone beneath the patrol leader's left foot shifted. A half-inch, enough to break the orc's stance, enough to make that massive body adjust, enough to create the opening. The blade entered the patrol leader's throat from below, punching through the gap between neck armor and jaw, severing the spine with a sound like a green branch snapping. The orc's eyes went wide, shocked, not angry. It hadn't expected to die. The worm's spirit in Verdanth drank. The orc's life force flooded through the blade, dense, concentrated, more than the thorn beast had held. William felt his channels fill, stretch, widen. The experience gain was enormous. Level 20. Bren had downed one of the lead pair, shield bashed to the knee, sword thrust to the armpit where the armor gap was. The other lead orc was fighting desperately, caught between Bren's shield and Holt's crossbow, but it was a cornered animal now, not a soldier. The 4th orc, the one who'd been behind the patrol leader, was gone. Retreated down the corridor the moment William had dropped from the ceiling, running for reinforcement. Let it go. We have seconds, not minutes.